Hi guys, and welcome to the Stephen King Sematary Club. Hi guys, we are finally talking about Pet Sematary, which is one of the best Stephen King novels ever. And I would go so far as to say it is his darkest work. I can't think of anything that just conveys such despair and heartbreak, and it's wrapped up in so much grief. It is a masterpiece, and I could see why he was hesitant to publish it. He did think he kind of crossed the line with child death and just the bleakest outlook that you could imagine. It is dark. So the book I will be using is my paperback Signet, which is my standard book that I always read when I read Pet Sematary, and I had thought about branching out. I've got my Stephen King Library edition, I've got one or two used copies in hardcover, and I don't know, I love the ritual of reading this copy. So that's what I'll be using for page numbers. I should branch out. I thought about it. I actively decided not to because I'm a creature of habit. So there is a preface of sorts at the beginning of this book. It's not entitled preface or anything like that, but there's a line in here that is one of my favorite lines of any Stephen King work. Quote, "Death is a mystery and burial is a secret." And that line always gives me chills. I love the complexity of it. It is so true. Like, no one knows what happens when you die. And the whole process after you die is witnessed by very few people. So it is interesting to me. At one point I did want to be a mortician. I really like 6 Feet Under. I think that is one of the best TV shows of all time. And I do find fascination in the secrets of burial and death. Part 1 is the Pet Sematary. We are introduced to the Creed family. Lewis and Rachel are the adults, and Ellie is the older sibling, Gage is the younger brother, and Winston Churchill is their cat. So this family is moving from Chicago, Illinois, to Ludlow, Maine. And Lewis is a doctor. He's going to work at the university. He's going to be in charge. And they had to relocate. And they have this beautiful house on a lot of just pastoral land. It's kind of out in the country, but there's a large highway in front of it. And the highway is the big problem. The highway is deadly. And as the family is kind of nearing the end of their ropes, so to speak, Lewis has this fantasy of putting them out on the side of the road and taking off to Disney World and being a medic down there. So that's an early indication of something that happens later, this fantasy that he has latched onto. Right after the Creeds start moving in, we meet one of my absolute favorite characters of all time, Judson Crandall. Judd is 83. He was born in 1900, and he is just completely linked to Fred Gwynne in my brain. But that's how I see him. And it was weird to see John Lithgow be him in the remake of the movie. And I love Judd so much. And he meets the family because there's a big ruckus because Ellie hurts herself, she cuts herself, and Gage gets stung by a bee, all in, the span of a few minutes, and the kids are crying and they're tired and everyone is grumpy, and Judd walks over to help if he can. Judd does mention the Pet Sematary, and at this point it is spelled completely correctly. And there's also a mention of Cujo. Quote, "There was a big old St. Bernard went rabid downstate a couple of years ago and killed 4 people." Page 28. And, I always say this, but I love when Stephen King references or does a callback to an earlier work, earlier characters. It just solidifies the reality of these worlds he makes. They are not isolated, and I think that's really good. Now, this book does deal with just so much death and morbidity. So I think this book really struck a nerve for me when I first read it, and as I continue to read it, and as death becomes a greater possibility. The older we get, the older everyone you know gets. It's just inevitable, and there's no escaping it, and it's all about how you deal with it and accept it or don't accept it. And this book just, it really strikes a nerve. So Ellie has her first day of school, and she comes home and starts talking excitedly about everything. She just can't contain herself. And Lewis looks over at Rachel. Quote, "There was something sad in Rachel's glance, and although she looked away quickly, Lewis felt a moment of terrible panic. We're really going to get old, he thought. It's really true. No one's going to make an exception for us." Page 35. And I think that's just way more accurate than I realized as a child. You know, you do kind of have this feeling at some point in your life that you'll just live forever, you'll be young forever, all these things, and then there's a line that gets crossed, and you start to accept the dawning of knowledge about your own mortality. So Lewis carries Gage up to his bed to be put down for a nap, and he feels the most horrible, dark, terror-inducing chill. It's just, he feels something threatening him and his family, but he doesn't know what it is. It's like a dark vision almost. And I love that imagery where he is standing in the landing and there is sunlight coming in. So it's one of those things where you get a horrible feeling in the middle of bright sunlight, or, you know what I mean? Like, the juxtaposition of it is very interesting. So of course we knew it was coming. They all take a trip to the pet cemetery. Judd takes them, and Ellie's super curious about it. Rachel's a little more hesitant. We start getting puzzle pieces put into place where we know that she had a terrible experience with death at a young age. Her sister died of spinal meningitis. Zelda really messed Rachel up. And Lewis has always kind of just left it alone and not pressed the matter. And so this will be a continuing theme, Rachel's inability to cope with death. They go to the pet cemetery, and it's somewhere I want to visit. You know, the way it's described, the way that children have come and worked through their grief and made monuments to their animals, their pets, their beloved critters. And Lewis even remarks that, you know, these children must have loved their animals so much that they were willing to sit there and carve out names or haul a large animal up to the pet cemetery and bury it. And, you know, those things are not even done for family members in most cases. You know, a lot of times you just call whoever you need to call, they come and they take the body, you know, but this is very much hands-on grieving. See Judd's first dog, Spot, where he died in 1914, which will be an important date to know. And the ground is just stony and not very fertile. And Judd remarks, quote, "Ground stony," Judd repeated. "Couldn't plant nothing here but corpses anyway, I guess." Page 45. Another line I really like. And there is, of course, the famous blowdown, which separates the pet cemetery from the deeper woods. And the blowdown is just very deliberate and looks too perfect to have occurred naturally. And it strikes Lewis as very peculiar. So already he has these thoughts brewing about the pet cemetery and the land beyond it. So after visiting the pet cemetery, Ellie starts contemplating the death of Church, and she realizes he will die, which also pulls in threads of her brother will die, her mother will die, her father will die, she will die, everyone she knows. She talks to Lewis about it. She's very upset, like really upset. And he tries to comfort her, but he also tries to tell her the truth. You know, he said that he remembered when his mother told him that babies were just found in fields when they really wanted a baby. And he never forgave his mom for telling him that lie. And he is also annoyed with himself for believing in it. Which, actually, I feel the same way about Santa Claus. I I hate that my parents told me about Santa Claus and that I believed it. And Lewis even says, quote, he's talking to Rachel, quote, "I don't think children ever forget the lies their parents tell them," page 55. So Rachel is just upset about the whole thing. She's mad that they went to the pet cemetery. She's mad at Judd for taking them. She is angry that Ellie is starting to worry about death. She is fine with Ellie knowing about how babies are born and how babies are conceived, but she does not like the other end of the spectrum. She is very, well, no one's gonna die around here. Everyone's healthy. She has this permanence bias, it's unlikely that anything will happen to any of us. And we know the sad truth of that, but she just goes after Lewis, and he doesn't know what to do, and he doesn't know what to say, and he's angry, and he thinks that, it makes sense that Ellie should know all this stuff, and she should expect death because it's in the cards. It's going to happen. And at the very end of their argument, he tells Rachel, well, then you're going to tell her if her cat dies. You're going to tell Ellie how it happened, and, you'll just have to deal with it. And Rachel yells at him that there's nothing natural about death, which is absurd, and she doesn't want him talking to Ellie about this stuff anymore. And so I could see where Lewis loses his cool, and he's like, well, fine, I wash my hands of it. You tell her if her cat dies, And I understand that she had a bad experience. I sympathize with that, but I do think she is irrational, and I think that she is way more unhinged than is warranted. She even says to Lewis, "I hate you." And I was trying to think, I don't think I've ever said that to anyone. I hate you. I don't think I have. And I've certainly never fought with anyone and then said, I hate you. I've never, that just, she said it so easily, it disturbs me and it bothers me because she's just, it bothers me that she is like that. I do think Stephen King made her a little bit too over the top. I mean, maybe not. Maybe I'm just weird. Maybe people say they hate each other all the time and mean it. She really seemed to mean it. So after this big fight with Rachel, Lewis decides one of the things that he could do to help the situation is to make an appointment for church to get neutered. That will actually prevent him from crossing the road so much. He won't be as into roaming, and that will help extend his life more than likely. So he puts that up there. It kind of smooths things over with Rachel. He and Rachel have made up, and then he goes off to the university for his first full day of students. The students have all returned to campus, and this is where things are going to get very chaotic and very dark and spooky. This kind of kicks everything off. The next thing that happens kind of sets things in motion.